The courthouse smelled of old paper and cold fear. Wooden benches creaked as people shifted, whispering about the case that seemed too obvious to even argue. On one side sat Daniel, a single father in a worn jacket, hands rough from years of overtime shifts, eyes heavy from sleepless nights. On the other side sat Melissa, his ex-wife, polished and confident, flanked by an expensive lawyer who didn't even look at Daniel, like he wasn't worth the effort. Daniel hadn't always been poor. He hadn't always been alone. Once, he had a family, a small house filled with laughter, and a promise that love would be enough. But when Melissa wanted more, bigger dreams, faster money, Daniel stayed behind with responsibility. When the marriage broke, she left with ambition. He stayed with their son, Ethan, and the bills. Ethan was everything to him. Every night shift, every skipped meal, every old pair of shoes, it was all for that boy. Daniel didn't complain. He didn't beg. He just worked harder. But when Melissa filed for full custody, claiming Daniel was unfit because he struggled financially, the ground beneath his feet began to crack. Now, here he was. Alone. No lawyer. No suit. Just a father fighting for his child. The judge adjusted his glasses. "Mr. Carter," he said, "where is your legal representation?" Daniel swallowed. His throat burned. "I couldn't afford one, Your Honor." Before he could finish, Melissa laughed. Not loud, just enough for the room to hear. A laugh filled with victory. "He can't afford a lawyer," she said smoothly. "That alone should tell you who's more capable of raising a child." The words hit Daniel harder than any punch. He felt every eye in the room turn toward him, some with pity, others with judgment. His hands trembled, but he kept his head up. He thought of Ethan waiting at school, unaware that his future was being decided in a room that smelled like defeat. Melissa's lawyer stood, confident and prepared, listing income statements, property documents, and polished arguments. Daniel listened, helpless, as his entire life was reduced to numbers on paper. When it was his turn to speak, his voice cracked, but he didn't stop. "I may not be rich," he said, looking at the judge, "but my son has never gone a day without love. I walk him to school. I help with his homework. I sit beside his bed when he has nightmares. I don't buy him everything he wants, but I give him everything I have." The courtroom was quiet, but quiet didn't mean convinced. Melissa leaned back, smiling. She thought it was over. Then the judge leaned forward. The judge studied Daniel for a long moment. Not his clothes, not his empty seat where a lawyer should have been, but his eyes, tired, honest, afraid, but determined. The judge tapped his gavel once. "I will appoint counsel." 4 words. The room froze. Melissa's smile vanished. Her lawyer stiffened. Whispers rushed through the benches like wind through dry leaves. Daniel blinked. "I'm sorry," he whispered. The judge repeated, slower this time. "I will appoint counsel," he continued, his voice firm. "This court does not measure a parent's worth by their bank account. Justice is not for sale. And no father should stand alone simply because he is poor." For the first time, Daniel felt something rise in his chest that wasn't fear. Hope. A court-appointed lawyer stepped forward, experienced, calm, sharp. And suddenly, the story changed. The lawyer asked questions no one had asked before. About who attended parent-teacher meetings. Who took sick days. Who packed lunches. Who showed up. Melissa shifted in her seat. Records were presented. School forms signed by Daniel. Teachers' notes praising his involvement. Neighbors' testimonies about the single dad who worked nights but never missed a game. Even text messages surfaced. Melissa canceling visits, choosing trips over time with Ethan. The courtroom no longer laughed. Melissa tried to speak, but her words sounded hollow now. Money filled her arguments. Love filled his. When the judge finally spoke again, his voice carried weight. "Custody," he said, "is not about comfort. It is about commitment." Daniel held his breath. Primary custody will remain with the father. Melissa's face went pale. The gavel struck. Daniel didn't cry in the courtroom. He waited until he stepped outside, sunlight hitting his face for the first time that day. He sank onto the courthouse steps, covering his face with his hands as tears finally fell, not of weakness, but of relief. That evening, when he picked Ethan up from school, the boy ran into his arms. "Did we win, Dad?" Ethan asked. Daniel smiled, holding him tight. "We never stopped winning, son."